This is Ethan, and I'm here with Dave, and together we are Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast, episode 89-inch.
On this week's episode, we are joined by Pat Regan, a keyboardist, producer, engineer, and mixer who toured with Weird Al and recorded on 3 of his early albums.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird Al.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
And we're back with another Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast episode. Dave, there was a lot of excitement that came out of last week's episode. I saw on our Facebook group a lot of people reminiscing about the Weird Al forum, and there was a special argument about how it was pronounced.
See, now I always thought it was pronounced Wowway because the initials of World of Weird Al Yankovic Forum is WOWAY. That was always the shorthand, and that was
Right.
the accepted shorthand. But there was some, some people who pronounced it Wowway and some people who pronounced it Woway because you've only ever seen it written. You never heard it because this was, an online forum. People were typing, back and forth to each other. So you'd read it in your mind however you read it. So I didn't realize that other people were pronouncing it Woway. I've always just pronounced it Woway.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've only ever heard it from you, so that's what I would have assumed. But one of the arguments I saw for Woway was you separate World of and then Way Weird Al, so it's kind of gives more importance to WAY. So who knows? Who cares? It's just funny to watch arguments come out of episodes like that.
I mean, there is one way we can solve it. We can ask Bart Van Den Acker, the person who created the World of Weird Al Yankovic Forum, how he pronounces it. That would pretty much put this to a rest.
I mean, would it necessarily? I mean, we've talked about, GIF versus GIF, off the air quite a bit. And you cite it is GIF because that's what the creator said. But I feel it's GIF and, it's just the more accepted term. So, once it gets out into the universe, can it really be the creator's say anymore? Definitely a topic for a secret episode at some point. Argue some pronunciations. Like, is it beautiful or is it beautiful?
Well, if you want to get into the whole Wowway versus Woway, GIF versus GIF, you can do that over on our Facebook group, where we have riveting conversations like that all the time.
And that's, of course, group.2000inch.com. And we'd love to have you join us.
Also on the group, Joe Jaffa shared an online post about someone watching Zootopia with the audio description on by accident and thinking it sounded like a narrated nature show.
So as soon as he posted that, I was like, all right, I need to check this out. So I went to Zootopia. It's on Disney Plus, and I turned on the audio description, and sure enough, it's like a British person, talking about, the rabbit moved to the, it really does sound like a nature show. It's very funny. I only watched a few minutes of it, but, I think next time, if there is a next time I ever watch Zootopia, it'll be with the audio descriptions on.
So, Ethan, here's a fun fact about Zootopia. Not only that when you put on the audio description track, it sounds like a nature show, but Al's gal, Monique Donnelly, she actually sings on the score to that film.
How awesome. Yes.
Now, we just talked to Monique the other day for the podcast, and we're really excited to get that episode out there for you guys. So stay tuned, and you'll hear a lot more from Monique soon.
Now, there's also a bunch of chatter about the cover of our theme song that we played by the great Summer Woods. Thank you so much for that bossa nova version of our theme song.
Yeah, that was so awesome. I definitely heard a lot of positive reviews about that one for sure. In fact, episode 14-inch guest, J.W. Halford, he texted me as soon as he heard the song and he said how great it was. So
yeah, leave it to J.W. to know what bossa nova is. So with the popularity of course, Summer Woods' awesome bossa nova theme song, we actually received another really incredible theme song for the show.
Oh, really? Where did you hear that?
No, Frank sent it to us, our intern. Didn't he copy you on the email?
No, Frank hasn't sent me anything in, I don't know, a couple weeks now.
No. The other day, he just sent around the invite for his birthday celebration for his close, most personal friends.
Wait, a birthday celebration?
Oh no, never mind. Forgot I said that. No, this but this theme song, it's really incredible, and dare I say, better than the original version that 2-time Grammy-nominated Jim Kimo West did.
Wow, better than the original version by 2-time Grammy-nominated Jim Kimo West. I gotta hear this. I'm so excited.
It's Ethan's Bad Things 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
It's a podcast about Weird Al.
It's Ethan's Bad Things 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Seriously, the whole podcast is about Weird Al.
It's Ethan's Bad Things 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
You don't have to listen, but we're glad you are.
Ethan's Bad Things 2000-inch Weird Al podcast.
Whoa, so great! Oh, I just can't get over it. Dave, you heard it right? Wasn't it great?
Who sent that in?
So this awesome theme song, of course, it came from our good and our longtime friend, huge Weird Al fan, huge fan and supporter of the podcast, Mike Minnick.
What the fudgesicle? After nearly 2 decades of friendship with Mike, I can't believe that one of my so-called friends created something so terrible and heinous.
I mean, it's pretty funny, Dave.
I'm just not sure I can be friends with him anymore.
I mean, it was a joke. I'm sure it was.
Oh, that was no joke.
Not a joke?
You think you know somebody, and then, boom!
Maybe he was upset that it took us about 6 months to play his Joe Franklin parody on the show.
Please, can we just move on from this? I'm just really upset right now.
Well, wow, Dave. I would have never imagined you'd react this way, but here, how about here we go. Let's check what's in the 347 Spatula Hotline. That will surely cheer you up, Dave. You love the 347 Spatula Hotline. The official hotline of Dave and Ethan's 2000 Weird Al podcast is sponsored by Angel Valenzuela and David Cash, two amazing Weird Al fans and podcast supporters.
Hey guys, Mike Minnick here. I was actually trying to reach Ethan and Dave's 2000 Weird Al podcast. I don't know, maybe you could forward this along to them. Anyway, I just listened to the episode where you interviewed Alicia and talking about that picture of Al with the deer. I actually have some insight into that. When he was doing promotion for his final album, they were taking photos and they told him that he had to take a picture with a deer. And he said, I really don't want to. And they said, no, it's mandatory fawn.
Oh, how's that? Certainly you must feel better now after hearing that great voicemail from Mike Minnick.
Well, I mean, I do like a good pun, but I don't know. I'm still kind of bummed out. I mean, hearing Mike's voice on the 347 Spatula Hotline, that just reminded me all about his parody theme song again.
Oh, well, I mean, we could play it again if you want. I mean, I wouldn't mind hearing it one more time or making it our official new theme song.
No, please, just don't do that.
All right. Well, there is one surefire way to put a smile on your face, Dave. It's time for the burrito ad. If that doesn't cheer you up, nothing will.
This week's episode is brought to you in part by vegan Mexican restaurant Burrito in Troy, New York, home of the 2-pound double wrapped in a quesadilla burrito. Come on down to Burrito and Burrito your burrito. Find them at burritosquared.com and at burritosquared on Instagram. And remember, not every burrito is a burrito, but every burrito can be burritoed. Thank you so much. I feel so much better right now.
Oh, good. Well, this will make you feel even better because it's time for This Week in Weird Al related news.
Late last week, Brian Posehn released New Music Sucks, his latest music video off of his Grandpa Metal album.
Now, why do we care? I mean, we love Brian Posehn, and he's a big Weird Al fan, but we care because both Patton Oswalt and Weird Al have cameos in his music video.
If you decide to check out the video, we must warn you, the lyrics are not family friendly, and there are a lot of spicy words in there.
Ooh, spicy!
Ethan, didn't you open up for Brian Posehn at a stand-up comedy show at the Palace Theater in Albany, New York? The same venue that Weird Al has performed at tons of times?
Yeah!
Okay, I thought so. In other news, this weekend, Sunday, January 17th, is the 2021 Southern California Slack Key Festival. The festival will feature our podcast theme song's very own two-time Grammy-nominated Slack Key virtuoso, Jim Kimo West. You know, that guy who did our official theme song and the one we will never, ever change, ever, for any reason whatsoever.
We get it, Dave. We get it. You can check out the Southern California Slack Keys Festival live. It'll be live streaming for free on Jim Kimo West Facebook artist page, which you can check out at facebook.com/slackhappy. And for more information about the other artists and how you can purchase an optional ticket to support the artists, just head over to calicoa.com/slackkey. That's KALAKOA.com/slack-key.
Speaking of two-time Grammy Award nominated Jim Kimo West, you know, the guy who wrote our incredible and permanent, never changing, ever official Dave and Ethan's 2000 Weird Al podcast theme song, we are thrilled to learn that the new Anita Lurch album that Jim worked on, Love Is My Religion, has won a Global Music Award. From all of us here at Dave and Ethan's 2000 Weird Al podcast, congratulations to Anita and Jim.
Now, while we're on the subject of two-time Grammy Award-nominated Jim Kimo West, there is some Grammy news. It has been announced that the Grammy ceremony, which was scheduled for January 31st, is being moved to March 14th. Now, this means that it's only an extra month and a half of having to keep all your fingers and toes and eyes crossed in hopes that Jim will win.
From all of us here at Dave and Ethan's 2000 Weird Al podcast, best of luck to you, Jim, on March 14th. We're really hoping we can call you Grammy Award-winning Jim Kimo West after that date. We are all aware that Weird Al's core band has been consistent since the early 1980s. As we dig deeper into his career, there are tons of other talented musicians that have contributed to the music we know and love. And it's always such a treat when we get to speak to one of them.
Dave and I are very excited to welcome our next guest. He is someone who has not only toured with Al, he recorded on 3 Weird Al albums as the piano and synthesizer player in 3D, Dare to Be Stupid, and Polka Party. And we are just so thrilled to have him joining us today. Keyboardist, producer, engineer, and mixer, Pat Regan. How's it going, Pat?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm doing great, actually. It's fun to be doing this with you guys.
Yeah, wow. It's so great to get to chat with you. Thanks for coming on the show.
You bet, yeah. This is kind of an unusual opportunity to reminisce about the old Weird Al days, but I know he's still going strong, which is great. Glad to see he's still doing it, and funnier than ever.
You recorded quite a bit with Al in the 80s.
Pretty much, yeah, and then toured with him as well. You know, we did a couple of tours, and which was very interesting. We actually opened up, or actually were on a double bill with the Monkees,
right?
And did kind of an extensive tour with those guys, you know, and that was kind of fun. And being in Van Halen's old tour bus.
Oh man, oh man.
Yeah, no, those are great days.
If you could take us back to the beginning, how did you get started in music?
Well, I was, you know, I took piano lessons like from 7 years old. Basically, my folks kind of thought I had some talent, and I really enjoyed playing the piano. But I didn't like, you know, the process of having to read music. We had a great piano teacher, me and my brother. Basically, we had this guy who was a concert pianist that played at the Hollywood Bowl all the time.
Wow.
And very talented, and but very strict as well. So, you know, he'd give me a lesson to, like, homework basically for the next week, come by to kind of see how we did. And my brother was great. You know, he was a very avid reader of music notation, and I just wanted to take the easy way out, so I just kind of learned it by ear. You know, I listen to my tutor's performance and then try to replicate it. And, you know, he'd like review it and say, well, that sounds pretty good, but this part doesn't exist. And try to show me that I was kind of fudging it up a little bit, you know. but I didn't really have the patience, even though eventually, I mean, I learned to read pretty well and to orchestrate and so forth, but in those days it was mostly by ear, and I had a really good ear. My brother was just the opposite, and he never really kind of, he was good, but he just never really kind of got into music, I, on the other hand, got into the blues and, progressive music, especially during the early 70s, with Yes and ELP and that kind of stuff. I love that kind of stuff, Mahavishnu Orchestra,
wow.
and jazz for that matter. So, and then I kind of, my parents really sort of were very understanding, and they wanted to promote that. And I bought a ARP Odyssey synthesizer back, I think it was 1973 or something like that. And that kind of got me on the road to electronic music. And I took electronic music courses in college. They had an old Moog modular 3, the one with the patch cords and the whole bit. But those things are very popular now, obviously. It's coming back around. And that really kind of taught me the fundamentals of, music sculpting effectively. You have to create something from nothing, you have to synthesize a sound. Mm-hmm. And as it turns out, because I never really had any formal training in recording technology, even though I kind of learned a lot of it from behind the board in the control rooms when I was doing records all the time, because I was a session keyboardist for a long time. And so I kind of picked up a lot of points when I was working with Spencer Proffer over at Pasha Studios, where I did Quiet Riot, and he was doing a lot of film scores and stuff like that. And I really got a chance to kind of learn the inside of what was going on in the control rooms, because that's where I would set up. I wouldn't be out in the studio with the other players mostly. I'd be in the control room, and just picked up a lot of, what was going on. And it all made sense because that's how I created sounds with synthesizers,
Right.
So, when you look at outboard gear in a control room, it's virtually the same thing as you have in a modular synthesizer. You're just plugging stuff into the board, And but I really got into synth playing in general, mainly because I get bored of like one-dimensional instruments. Like, even guitar is very, it's got a lot of, dynamics to it, and you can do a lot of stuff with guitar, but it is a one sound instrument other than the distortion and all that. Piano in particular is just kind of, it sounds one-dimensional, even though it depends on how you play it. But with a synthesizer, you could be like an entire orchestra, string section or something you've never heard before, and that's fascinated me. And that's what I got mostly into, being an electronic keyboardist, and had an incredibly, ridiculously large rig back in the 70s that you have to have like several synthesizers to play it polyphonically, because each synthesizer will only play one note at a time, so you'd have to have several of them to play a chord, And
wow.
so it was the old days,
When I picture a synthesizer, I picture like a Yamaha keyboard, and that's it. So you're telling me that these were a lot more advanced.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, the fact is there's no such thing as presets in those days. You had to create a sound by just, changing the oscillator frequencies and the filter and the envelope generators. You had to sculpt the sound from scratch, and then try to like do that on the fly in a live performance,
Wow.
And it was challenging, but it was a great learning experience, because I know exactly, if I'm thinking of a sound, I know exactly what knob to go to create it, Mm-hmm. Nowadays, it's so much easier. You just have a preset, like you said, like a Yamaha board or whatever. Or when I was with Al, I had the Jupiter 8 synth, which Al ended up buying one as well, which is, I wish to God I hung on to it, because that is like the premium of all synthesizers now. They go for like 15 grand, they're hard to find, But that was one of the first polyphonic programmable type synths, other than the sequential Prophet 5 and the CS80, all of which I did own in that period of time. But it was, that was the next phase. Everything started to go digital, and you ended up, it was analog controlled or digitally controlled analog synths. And you were able to store memories, of the sound, and you could switch on the fly in a live performance, which made a huge difference for live, And so Al and I had a couple of Jupiter 8s, which was top of the line at that point in time. And that's what I used for the synth intro for Eat It, because, and that's technically why I even got Al's gig to begin with, is that I got a call. I was in Cherokee Studios in Hollywood. We was working on a record. George Tutko was the engineer. He's passed away since, whatever. But he knew Derringer pretty well. I mean, I had met Derringer before this, I think. I'm trying to piece it together as far as timeline here, but in any case, Derringer was looking for a way to create the sound from Michael Jackson's "Beat It," right, which is that big synth intro, which happens to be a synclavier. In those days, a synclavier system was about $200,000, and they were really ridiculously expensive to rent, even, you know. So I said, well, yeah, I mean, I could do it. You know, we just have to rent one, you know, if we can find one. Or maybe I could just kind of come up with something similar on the Jupiter 8. And they said, well, would you mind coming down to the studio and see if and just give it a shot? So I did. I went down and I created that sound that was close enough to the synclavier that's what we ended up using. And I just found the whole operation really very entertaining when we were in the studio, because just one thing led to another, and I ended up doing more songs. And then when we tracked that stuff, that was the fun part, because we did it all as a band in the studio, you know, with Bermuda on drums and Jim, and Al would come out and that would be the first time we'd ever even hear the lyrics, is when we performed it, you know, and tracked it. And I was trying to keep a straight face as we're playing this stuff. That it basically was, you know, like King of Pain, you know, which is King of Suede, you know, and stuff that, you know, I'm just, you know, learning the tracks as the originals, you know. And then Al comes in and does these ridiculous lyrics, and it was hilarious. I mean, it was gas to do. So I just kind of got hooked on the thing, and it was fun working with Derringer. He's a great guy. And talented as well, and the rest of the band was good, you know. So it was just it was kind of like the ultimate top 40 gig, you know. You do the hits, but you know, with Al's slant on everything, you know, which was you know, the fun part.
Right.
So it was very entertaining, and that's why even going out with him live was a lot of fun as well, because that was almost kind of like a mini Alice Cooper show in a way, you know, with all the projections and the costumes and everything, you know.
I want to talk a little bit more about the Weird Al Yankovic in 3D recording session. I mean,
Sure.
you pretty much ended up on every song, or almost every song, as far as you know,
I think
right?
so,
On the
yeah,
album.
yeah. I got a gold album sitting in the living room. Yeah.
Wow.
Because it's and a Grammy for that matter. I got a Grammy certificate because that won Best Album Comedy Album of the Year in 1984. And what's funny, it's like that's the best way to win a Grammy is probably being on the Best Comedy Album, because you don't have that much competition with Weird Al at that point. Who the hell else is going to win a Grammy? You know? So so that album won a Grammy. That was great, which is kind of why, you know, in the Complete Al, I think that's how they came up with that concept with, you know, going to Michael Jackson's home, you know, with all the Grammys behind him, which was very funny. But I ended up pretty much on the entire record, you know, and that was, you know, that was how he did, you know, his records. I guess he still probably does, where it's mostly half of it's parodies and half of it's originals, you know.
Yep.
And like in 3D and Nature Trail to Hell and all that kind of stuff, you know, that's all Al stuff, and that was very funny. The thing where he does at the end with the reverse, you've probably heard about that, right?
Of course.
Yeah, the verse lyrics.
Because that was during that Judas Priest thing or whatever, you know, and the Satan eats cheese whiz line.
Were you there for that
very
recording? The Satan eats cheese?
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly. I was pretty much there for most of the recording of the record, yeah.
Wow.
And it was very funny, very entertaining, you know, I will say. One of the best times I've had in the studio.
Now, not only did you get a Grammy for In 3D, I saw you on a recent thing, Artists on Lockdown, and in the background I could see your gold record from In 3D.
Oh, you saw that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's in the living room. As a matter of fact, well, that and Dare to Be Stupid both got gold. Probably sold a lot more by now, you know.
Right.
But yeah, that and the Quiet Riot records and all that, and the Kiss record and all that kind of stuff like that. Yeah, the Wall is pretty impressive.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
That's
now I'm proud of those, you know. But that's the thing. It's like, you know, Al's been incredibly successful for this. You know, he created this genre. Well, I guess Dr. Demento sort of kind of spurred him on. but
Right.
he certainly made a great career out of it, you know.
Yeah.
Now, you'd mentioned that you got to hear the lyrics for the first time in the studio, but I'm guessing you got to see the music ahead of time, right? Or did you see that for the first time as well?
Well, it was mainly, you just, he'd say like, we're going to do a version of Beat It, we're going to do a version of, King of Suede was King of Pain, the Police. And,
Right.
he'd tell us, what songs he wants to do. And so I just basically learned the track, from the original,
For a track like Midnight Star or Dare to Be Stupid or something like that, that's a Weird Al original song. I mean,
Right.
what kind of guidance did you get on a song like that?
Well, it would start with like sort of, listening to like Whip It, let's say, by Devo or something that was a classic Devo track.
Mm-hmm.
And then Al and I would just kind of, work. He'd kind of show me the part, or like a like that. That's the line I guess he wanted, and we'd kind of work it up a little bit. But it was mainly just sort of he'd already have the melody kind of fleshed out. But it was mainly kind of like listening to the original artist that we parodied to get the sounds,
Right.
So a lot of the stuff like Dare to Be Stupid was obviously modeled after Devo, And
Right.
any of the stuff that that we did that was a direct parody, like Eat It or whatever, that was obvious what we had to do. I basically just copy those parts, and it was just it was sort of a mix and match. I mean, Al's a very accomplished musician. I mean, he's a great accordion player for sure. And that translates to keys. So he can pretty much tell everybody what he's looking for. But the lyrics was always, I'm not sure if he just did it on purpose or what, but that was the first time I'd hear most of the lyrics would be just while we were tracking the song, which was hilarious,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's a big surprise. Exactly. There's another track too that it was produced by, what's his name, Peter Wolf, the guy who did the Starship, We Built the City, all those songs, and it was called Here's Johnny. It was basically a very complex synthesizer sequencer track, and somehow I managed to get individual tracks from Peter
Wow.
of what went down on the keyboards of the original of that track, and I managed to dissect it. And I had sort of a rudimentary Roland digital sequencer at the time that managed to work with the Roland Jupiter 8. And kind of programmed the whole thing via that. And this is like in the really early days of doing anything with digital sequencing.
Wow.
And I felt quite an accomplishment pulling that off relatively in real time, because I think Peter did it like, multi-tracking it, and that was a heck of a job, I imagine, doing the original. But that was probably the most challenging on that record. Living with a Hernia that was fun, because I'm a really an avid funk enthusiast.
Yeah.
James Brown and all that. I mean, I love that stuff. That was fun to do, and what Al turned that into was hilarious. And actually performing that live was really a lot of fun too. We did the whole
Oh, I
thing with
can
the
imagine.
cape. What James Brown always tried to leave the stage, and they'd come back and put the cape on him. And he pulled it. I mean, I have to say that Jay Levy. I mean, he was brilliant. How I know he and Al came up with all that the performance end of Al's show, and how they managed to pull off like the whole thing with Eat It, where it was like the same set from Michael Jackson,
Yes.
and everything they did for video was like that was a parody of the original video, and very well done. I mean, I just that really surprised me when I saw some of those videos.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that Jay's still working with them. I didn't know if they were still together or what. I know that I think how I met Jay too, because that was through Jake Hooker, who was who wrote I Love Rock and Roll, that
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Al turned into I Love Rocky Road.
Right.
But Jake
Right.
knew Jay. This is kind of a long, I'm trying to figure this whole thing, like you were talking about earlier, everybody's connected to everybody in one way or another. Jake Hooker was Rick Derringer's manager.
Oh, okay.
And I'd known Jake, and through another thing, he was good friends and I guess partners with Rick Stevens, who owned the record plant. And Rick and I go way back, because I produced one of his bands that he was developing Shotgun Messiah back in the 90s. I mean, it's all sort of kind of falls into place. And I did some work with Deep Purple over at the record plant through Rick. And Jake, he and Jay were really good buddies. And because of Derringer, I think that's probably because of the connection with Derringer producing Al. So it was all this kind of, everybody was sort of interconnected to some degree, And I kind of even knew Jay before I even started working with him, But Al, at the time, I didn't, when I got that call from Derringer to come down and try putting the parts down to Eat It, I didn't know Al other than just hearing him every once in a while on Dr. Demento's show on the radio, because I was a fan of Dr. Demento, it was fun meeting him eventually, actually touring with him.
Oh, yeah.
But that's the first time I'd actually met Al was at the studio when I went down to do Eat It. And that got the whole ball rolling, and I just really enjoyed the whole process that stuck with it for several years. I was working with Al, I think till like the end of 86 or 87, something like that. So it went on for about 3-4 years,
Yeah, I mean, you stuck with Al through his Dare to Be Stupid album, through his Polka Party album. You went out on tour with him on 2 separate tours. I mean, yeah, you and Al were definitely teaming up there in the early to mid 80s.
Yeah, well, and we did like some television show. We did like Solid Gold. We did Like a Surgeon on Solid Gold, which is that's pretty classic. And all, and
right?
Just,
yeah.
I mean, it was just it was fun. I had a really good time. It was Al was like a huge star overnight because of Eat It, because that went through the roof, And from that point on, he's just been, it's been Weird Al has been like a celebrity, big celebrity ever since. So, he's definitely, he's kind of milking it, and I'm glad to see he's still doing it, Now he's turned into a movie star.
Of course. I wanted to talk again a little bit about Dare to Be Stupid. I mean, when I think of iconic keyboard or synthesizer parts, Dare to Be Stupid is very iconic to me. Do you remember anything else about that process?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, that was another challenging sequencer, thing to do, and to do that live, that was another thing. Like, how do we do this? So we didn't want to use tapes.
Right.
So at that point, I was using an emulator at that point that had a built-in sequencer. Things are starting to get pretty advanced in the keyboard world. And I ended up programming the parts to 8 tracks of the emulator sampler, and some of it I basically lifted. I mean, a lot of it was played on the Jupiter 8 originally, but then to do all that and play that lick, I played it in real time, but there's a lot of backing parts to it, So there was several different little parts that actually I programmed into the sequencer, and then played the Jupiter 8 on top of that for live. So the ending sound sounded exactly like the record, and it was coming off the stage as opposed to off a tape machine, So that was actually kind of cool. It was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun because that's the kind of thing I get into. I'm a kind of a nerd as far as the the technical aspect of all this stuff goes, But it was a very, like you say, it's a very memorable melody. I mean, it's very typical of something Devo would do, But it's one of those things you can't get out of your head after you've heard it a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
And doing it live was fun too, because we do the whole Devo bit, we'd dress up in the trash bag outfits, and come out, looking like Devo. It was fun. And Al would always intersperse those iconic, interviews in between the costume changes,
Another really iconic Al original with a lot of great synthesizer is Midnight Star. Do you have any recollection of putting that one together?
This one doesn't kind of bring too much to memory, though, as far as like the parts. Some nice guitar playing on that one, though. And I think, some of the stuff, I know that like Derringer actually played a couple of guitar parts. I know Jim played most of it, but Derringer, like on Eat It, he played the solo on that. But that one doesn't that one's hard to kind of recollect, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So I can't say exactly what I ended up doing on that. I mean, it does sound, I remember the parts a little bit, But again, most of the stuff, this is mostly the Jupiter 8 analog polyphonic synthesizer for most of the stuff I did on Al stuff, other than maybe the piano or whatever,
Yeah.
Yeah, another iconic Weird Al original song, One More Minute.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember recording that one?
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Again, this is but the stuff, we would learn these tracks, and again, he would never really kind of do lyrics, from my recollection, until we basically were performing it, So it was like that's when it all kind of came together, You can kind of hear what we were actually doing at that point,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, and then all the stuff, he had that kind of theme going through everything about food, everything was somewhat kind of
Right.
sort of perversely related to food, other than like, certain, I mean, obviously like living with a hernia or whatever, that's what do you have, what else could you say? That's just a classic parody,
Yeah.
Right.
And especially, how the way he performed it, with, like James Brown with a hernia, that was just hilarious.
Addicted to Spuds, another great food-based parody.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's just brilliant,
Now, on Al's website, it says that you joined Al for 2 shows, including a practice show at the Starlight Amphitheater in Burbank in June 1984, but then you didn't actually join him for that tour, the Tour of the Universe?
I think, well, I'm not, 1984, that's when that was? Starlight
Yeah.
Amphitheater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I did join him for that because I'm pretty certain I was on like the first couple of tours right after In 3D came out. And it didn't say, well, I do remember the Starlight Amphitheater gig. That was great because that was one of the, I guess the first times we did like the big, the costume changes, the choreographed dancers, the interviews with Madonna and Prince and all that kind of stuff. And I think Al, actually, I think he entered the amphitheater from a helicopter, from what I understand.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
It was a big deal, and,
Wow.
and Al, actually, I'm almost certain I did more gigs. Now, maybe it not have been the entire tour, but I did more gigs right after that because I remember we had Gene Black as another guitar player. He played on that gig. Gene was is a good friend of mine. I still know him, and he's still around. He was Joe Cocker's guitar player until Joe passed away.
Oh.
And so Gene was basically in that lineup. And we did a couple of gigs. We did the Starlight Amphitheater. I remember we did like, I don't know if I don't know if that was when we did the Greek Theater, if that was that tour or not. I think it might have been. And we did like some, I don't know, some major festivals, one down at Dana Point, and we did, a few gigs. But again, I'm not entirely sure if that was the entire tour, There were several things going on in my professional life at that point that I might have gotten pulled away from, So it's hard to say,
We do know officially that you joined the Stupid Tour from the beginning. That was in 1985.
Well, yes, I did that one. Right. So the other one, the Starlight Amphitheater I do remember doing and a few gigs around that era, but it may not have been the entire tour. So it's, but the Dare to Be Stupid tour, absolutely, I did that. And that was a lot of fun. And then that was like when we had the Monkees, we were touring with the Monkees at the time, which was kind of a circus. And that was, other than what's his face, Mike Nesmith, who was the only guy that wasn't on the tour, but everybody had their own, each family member had their own bus, it was that kind of ridiculous, It was, there was no expense, spare no expense on that tour, And I think we had Van Halen's tour bus too, which was really nice. So we were riding in style as well, But that was a cool tour.
What can you tell us about, Stupid Tour versus the tour with the Monkees? What were some of the differences that stood out to you?
Well, this is probably something I may imagine Al would probably remember and might not think too kindly of. I think I'm trying to remember which one. I think it was a Stupid Tour that I had my girlfriend out on the road with me at the time, Patty, and I basically, where she came out and we basically we kind of camped out in the tour bus, so it was kind of. But you know, I don't think anybody kind of was weird about it or whatever. But I don't know for sure, because you know, it was kind of like Spinal Tap in a way, I guess, you know. But you know, we got a chance to go do a lot of sightseeing. You know, Patty and I you know, it was great. Got to tour, and then we'd go sightseeing every day, and unfortunately, it was always late getting to the gig, and I always got chewed out by Jay and everybody because we were, you know, taking advantage of, you know, sightseeing on the tour's dime. You know? So, you know, but I never got much grief from Al about that. But you know, I don't know if that really kind of took its toll with the rest of the guys. Maybe so, you know. But that was, I do remember, I have fond memories of that myself, though. That was great.
That was the 1985 tour, the Stupid Tour, like the first tour experience that you've had, or have you toured with other bands prior to that?
Well, probably the longest tours. I mean, I've toured with other, I mean, we've done like, you know, in other bands I've been in, we did like, we opened up for Alice Cooper up in Canada and did a few shows here and there. But mainly, I never really did a lot of touring. Had the opportunity to do when I did the Quiet Riot stuff. They wanted me to go out on tour, but the problem is in those days, you know, keyboards were really looked down upon, you know, in rock bands, you know. So I was going to have to be like behind the curtain, you know, off to the side of the stage. And I said, nope, I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
So so I turned down a lot of tours. I did a lot more session work than touring, you know. That was my gig, and I kind of, you know, made better money doing that, and it was just a lot more fun, really. Touring can kind of get to you after a while.
Okay, sure, absolutely.
So and eventually that's so I didn't do a lot of extensive touring, and you know, eventually just, you know, got signed to Warner Brothers. That's when I kind of split off from Al, because I got a record deal with Warner's, and which actually bought me my studio in Hollywood, which I had for 10 years on Hollywood Boulevard. And that's where I did bands like Deep Purple and Kiss and all these bands, you know. So that took me into a whole different, you know, realm of stuff, you know. But I do occasionally I do, you know, keyboards, mainly when I actually do productions like I've been working for Richie Blackmore for the past, you know, 27 years, basically.
Wow.
And done just about every project he's done. And I pretty much play all the keyboards. Now I'm actually programming drums, and, you know, I'm basically the backup, you know. And producing and engineering and mixing and so forth, you know, so it's pretty much the whole ball of wax. So I still get a chance to perform, you know, but it's mostly in the studio, you know, not live.
Now, one iconic venue that the Monkees tour hit was Red Rocks in Denver, Colorado. Do you remember performing at Red Rocks?
I absolutely do. And I will say that was, I had the worst hangover in my life the day of the gig.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, Al and I got invited to, there was the Playmate of the Month contest at some cantina in Denver or Colorado, right? So Al and I we were judges, basically. And so we got to judge the Playmate of the Month, and they just kept serving us pitchers of margarita all night long, you know? And it got pretty crazy. And I just remember getting to Red Rocks, completely hungover out of my mind. And you know, Red Rocks the altitude is ridiculously high. I mean,
yeah.
The air is very thin.
Sure.
and I just felt so sick and nauseated. Of course, fortunately they have oxygen tanks in the dressing rooms. You know,
right.
Because because they know people that perform there are not used to the altitude. So thank God for that. So I'd have to go off and get a blast of oxygen every once in a while just to keep going.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, it was a great experience playing there, but I wish I had felt a little better when
right.
I was playing the gig. You know? But yeah, that definitely is a very memorable experience. I hope Al won't get pissed off at me for spilling the beans.
Oh, that's great. I love that story.
I mean, that sounds like a dream gig, and then you get to go play Red Rocks.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and then, you know, you have a tendency to sort of overdo things when you're out on the road anyway. So that's, you know, those are the days of my youth when I didn't know any better. But yeah, it was very memorable, you know.
Yeah, obviously Red Rocks is a very memorable experience. Do you have any other memorable venues that you remember or particularly liked performing at?
Well, the Greek Theater was cool. I loved playing. I had my entire family come out and see us at the Greek Theater, which was kind of cool because they didn't get a chance to see us elsewhere.
Yeah.
But that's a nice venue. I really enjoyed that as well. And then, you know, just there's quite a few places. The Beacon Theater was cool, you know, in New York. That's a classic. That was great. That was kind of an interesting gig because they had me come out. There was like an opening act, some old vaudevillian guy that needed a piano accompaniment, you know, and Jay comes on and he goes, "Man, we need you to play piano on this." And they gave me a chart and I'm going, "Oh God, I got to learn this thing, you know, and go out and play." And it was horribly embarrassing as I was making clams all over the place. It was just me and this guy, you know, in the spotlight. And but other than that, the gig was fine. I mean, you know, Al was great, you know.
Right.
So yeah, the perils of touring, you know, as a session guy. I do remember too. It was like this is when he did like the interviews with Prince and Madonna and all that in between songs and all that sort of thing. And so they had to set up a projector at the Beacon Theater, and they were having issues with trying to get it rolling. And I had, you know, I no projectors or whatever. My dad used to be in the, you know, used to be a salesman, a camera shop salesman or whatever. And so the fact is, I went up and took a look at the projector to try to see if I can, you know, get the thing threaded right. And all of a sudden, this guy comes rushing down, screaming at me. It turns out, I didn't realize that in New York at that point, you know, the unions were just so strict about anybody doing anything.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that you're not allowed to do, you know. And they were having a connection fit. I mean, they really freaked out that I was even touching the projector.
Wow.
And I'm just trying to help, you know.
Yeah.
And so they basically, it was the union guy who stopped it, and they just had to wait till the projectionist got there to fix the thing, you know. So
jeez.
In those days, I've been a union session player, but you know, not to that degree, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I wouldn't freak out if somebody came over and played the keyboard for whatever reason. But anyway, that was another memory.
I'm curious with your tour with the Monkees. You know, you mentioned all the different tour buses and stuff. Did you guys have any, you know, actual interaction with the Monkees, or was it pretty separate?
Oh yeah, you know, I would we'd get you know, we'd see them all the time, like Peter and Mickey and Davey. Actually, were very very nice people. Actually,
Oh, yeah.
And Mickey had his entire family. He had his daughter Amy was on the tour, and she was kind of a aspiring actress, quite attractive. You know, everybody was trying to hit on her at the time. But yeah, I mean, they were very pleasant people. I mean, Davey was great, and Peter was just the regular guys. You know,
Yeah.
Mickey had a little bit more of an attitude, but you know, but nice guy. You know, very
Right.
nice guy.
Right.
Yeah.
But they were good. They had a really good band. You know, they actually had some really good players. You know, that were better than they were. You know. But they would, you know, they'd play their own instruments, but they, you know, it was a good show. You know, if you're into the Monkees, for sure. And I know Bermuda was totally in heaven because he loves the Monkees. You know.
All right.
Yeah, it's just too bad that Nesmith wasn't there. You know, because that would have been great. You know,
Yeah.
in the reunion. But the
Sure,
three of them
yeah.
were good enough. Yeah.
So I'm curious, I mean, you know, Playmate judging aside, what was a typical day out on the road with Weird Al and his band like?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there really was a typical day. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, we'd be just, you know, going into a hotel room and then you'd probably sleep for most of the time of the day. I mean, Patty and I would get out and do a lot of sightseeing, and quite frankly, it was exhausting after a while, you know, traveling in the bus or whatever, but it was great. You know, I had great memories of that. But then, you know, you'd be in like really nice, you know, metropolitan areas or whatever. And then you'd be like in the middle of, I remember we were traveling through I don't know where the hell this was it Kentucky or something like that, and we had to stop for gas, and this was like a scene from Deliverance. I swear to God, it was scary. It was like the local hillbillies, coming out, and the kids sitting on the porch playing banjo, and at the gas station, and they're all looking at us like we're all these long-haired freaks,
Right.
and it was kind of unnerving. I thought that somebody was going to come out with a shotgun or something, but that was odd, but that's, you're just traveling through areas that you just normally wouldn't,
Yeah.
and, but a lot of, it was a great way to see the country. Seriously. I mean, it was, cause I had done a lot of traveling in the United States, before, other than back to New York and, just in Hawaii or whatever, but not to the, the Midwest or whatever. I hadn't seen a lot of that. So that was kind of fun, and, I've done a lot of traveling in Europe and so forth, but I guess Al does he travel to Europe? I don't even know. He must have a fan base there, I would imagine, right?
Oh yeah, he's done several legs of a couple tours over in Europe. He's gone to Australia.
No, that would have been fun to do some European or Asian tours with Al. I think that would have been a gas, but I never got the opportunity.
Yeah.
Cool.
But so the tours I was on were mainly domestic, and just all the major cities of the U.S., and everywhere we would go, no matter like small little diners or whatever, Al would always have these amazing fans would show up, asking for autographs. He was popular back then, and it was amazing to me. People. They knew him no matter what, He's recognizable, of course, obviously.
Right.
But even at that point, I didn't know he was as big as he was,
Yeah.
And he had a lot of adoring fans everywhere we went.
When you were out on the Dare to Be Stupid tour, or even out with the Monkees, what size venues were you guys playing at, as far as capacity and that kind of stuff?
Oh, with the Monkees, we were playing mostly kind of arena-sized places, or larger venues. The earlier gigs, I mean, there was like some gigs that I remember playing at. Like we were at some, I forget where this was, but it was some dive in the middle of like Midwest somewhere. Could have been in Texas for that matter, from what I'm trying to remember. But I remember it was like a small venue. Probably didn't hold more than like 200 people, I suppose. And the stage was completely falling apart.
Oh, no.
And it was like were my keyboards, and keyboards are pretty heavy, There was like, you could feel the floor kind of bouncing up and down underneath me. And I think Al actually fell through the stage that evening, as a matter of fact.
Oh, no.
I think it was something, it broke a hole, and I think his leg went through the stage. If I'm not, somebody did. I don't know if it was Al, but somebody actually went through the stage. It was this rickety old stage, we could have probably sued these guys. But that was one of the few that was really kind of a pathetic venue, but for the most part, there'd be either like state fairs or, relatively large venues,
Right.
They'd be actually,
Okay, yeah.
decent crowds. But you're paying your dues when you're doing gigs like that.
Right, yeah.
But I wish I could remember the place that was in, but I think it might have been like northern Texas or something like that. Can't recall exactly.
You are listed on the Complete Al as composer. Do you recall working on that project?
I do. We were doing a gig at I think it was a convention in Century City in LA here. And, it must have been a convention because it was kind of an unusual, it was a daytime show, and we made an appearance. I don't even think it was a full show. We just did several songs or whatever. And then Jay comes over and says, "Oh yeah, you got to go over to this studio over in Hollywood. They want you to do this some keyboards for a soundtrack thing." And I didn't really know too much about it, but as it turns out, it was the Complete Al, and the guy who was there was Bob. Is it Bob Weiss? Yeah, Bob Weiss.
Yeah,
I think
Bob Weiss.
Yeah, the producer guy. Did I think didn't he work on Airplane and Naked Gun and all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah.
He was there, and he basically said, "Yeah, we just need you to do like sort of the underscore for this scene in this documentary we're doing for Al." and turns out that was the Michael Jackson scene for Eat It. So it was kind of like the creepy horror movie thing, where he goes to meet Michael for the first time, and that's with all the Grammys behind him and all that. So that was kind of like done on the fly. But Bob basically kind of told me what he was looking for. Sort of said, yeah, we just need this kind of eerie kind of thing, and I basically just did it, on the fly while I was there, And and that turned out that was the underscore for that particular scene. I might have done some other stuff. I can't recall if there was any other parts of the complete Al that I did, but that for sure was the main thing I did. And the guy that got to play Michael Jackson was great. It was spitting image of Michael Jackson at the time.
Yeah.
But that's probably that's probably courtesy of Jay's. Jay's like, he's great at coming up with duplicating stuff, like even like I'm fat, and like one of my favorite videos for Al is the one they did of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. What was the name of that track? Yabba Dabba
Yes.
Doo. Right, that's brilliant. I mean, it's so accurate, how they pull all that off. But that's after I'd left the band or whatever. But I got a kick out of watching them do that.
Now, we all know Al's current keyboard player, Ruben Valtierra. Have you ever been in touch with Ruben at all? Or is there a feud going on?
Oh, yeah. No, we spoke. I haven't spoke to him recently, but we speak periodically. He'd have some questions about this and that, and he was a very nice guy. I mean, he was sort of just kind of asking me, simple things about like, what did you do for this? And I try to pick my brain a little bit to try to remember exactly. That was when he came up with, he said, Al is very adamant that you find this chainsaw sound that you used for Like a Surgeon. I said, really? I said, what's so special about that? And it's like, it was like a sample. I don't really even know where the heck I got it from, but I might have even recorded a real chainsaw for that matter.
Wow.
But it was done on the emulator. And we basically had to go through all these audio files to try to locate this stuff, but Al was apparently very adamant to try to replicate that specific sound.
Wow.
Which is okay. And Ruben said, he said, Al thinks that you're the only guy that could do this stuff, or some of the sounds that, I came up with in those days, I mean, I that's very flattering, but I don't think that's absolutely true. But that's great that he would say that, But Ruben's a great guy. I mean, he seems very, he's obviously competent as a keyboard player, and I'm just surprised he's managed to hang in there as long as he has, even though I don't necessarily blame him because it is a fun gig,
Oh, yeah.
And like I know the rest of the guys are, just that he keeps the rest of the band together. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That rarely happens.
Yeah. It's I can't remember the figure or the exact names, but it's like there's only a handful of bands that have actually stayed together as long as Al's band has.
Well, I'm sure it's a small list,
Yeah.
because everybody goes
definitely.
through. I mean, if nothing else, from sickness or illness or whatever. But I mean, it's like I think there was a one point in Fleetwood Mac's career that they actually booked the band as Fleetwood Mac, and none of the original players was in the band, and the fans just freaked out. So what the hell are you trying to pull here? So, I mean, as long as, at least you got to have one guy in the band.
Right.
Right.
But it's just, it's like after a while, just selling the name,
Right, exactly.
But for the most part, yeah, I mean, a lot of changes happen in most, famous bands. And I guess it comes down to, it's the material, if you're real big fans of the material and it sounds faithful to the original, then you're okay with it. I actually I was working with John Payne from Asia, and he had this thing in Vegas at the what used to be the Hilton in Vegas, the Elvis stage, and I forget what the hotel was taken over by Goldman Sachs. I don't even know what they called it at that point. But anyway, he had this show called The Rock Vault, and it was brilliant. They basically did performances of pop songs like Led Zeppelin and Foreigner and all these different famous songs, but with a bunch of different iconic type of, performers, what's his face from Heart, the guitar player, and all the players on the stage were like from various famous bands and whatever. And we went to check it out one night, and they had quite a large crowd every night in the Elvis Theater. And I have to say, it was the ultimate tribute band when you really come right down to it. But they did like Zeppelin. They did Stairway to Heaven. That I don't think Zeppelin ever sounded that good in their life, So when you hear the song sound exactly like the record, you kind of tend to not really pay much attention to who the hell's up there on stage. Because I saw Zeppelin back in the day, and believe me, they were nothing like the record, it was kind of a disappointment, So I suppose if people, if you're really, if the tunes really hold up, then it really kind of doesn't matter, I suppose, You can get away with, changing your personnel around a lot.
There's something special about seeing, the guys who actually wrote and performed the music on the albums. It really.
Well,
I
absolutely,
think
but unfortunately, unfortunately, a lot of them aren't even around anymore.
Right.
But for Blackmore, for instance, I mean, he put Rainbow back together again, which was pretty big in the '70s, and he ended up. Because I did a Rainbow record back in '95, which was sort of before that was the last incarnation of it. And it was all new people. He was the only guy from the original band, but it's Blackmore's Rainbow, so he can get away with that.
Right.
And the new band is the same thing. It's basically all unknown guys. Singer sounds just like Ronnie Dio, and cross between Ronnie Dio and Ian Gillan. And, and people, and they, he does really well. I mean, they did like this big festival in Sweden in front of 70,000 people, and it's like, he still is he's revered over in Europe for the most part. I don't think anybody really, doesn't have quite as big of a fan base here in the States, but he's always been sort of big in Europe, and Japan and whatever. But I think people just come out to see him. But at least he's still the original member, But nobody else is, But to have like Fleetwood Mac not even have Mick Fleetwood in it, I mean, what the heck is that? Or Stevie Nicks or anybody, It's like But they rectified that pretty quickly, But Al, I have to say, man, he's got a loyal band. That's great that he still has the same players.
Now, outside of working with Al in the studio and being on tour with him, did you hang out with Weird Al at all? Like go to the local malt shop or go, get some ice cream?
Well,
to that
not exactly. I mean, we were never like close buds or whatever, but we did, we'd go out to like I told you about the Playmate event thing,
Right.
Or we just we would basically kind of be in the same hotel or whatever. We'd kind of meet up or whatever. Mostly it's the same thing with the rest of the guys in the band too, for that matter. Like when he did the UHF premiere party, it was a little bit hard to kind of socialize with him that much, but that was over at the China Club in Hollywood, and I was kind of amazed. I mean, he was sort of in his actor mode, I guess, at that point, and hanging out with all the Hollywood elites. And I was just sitting at the table with Francis Ford Coppola. I think Al sat there and Derringer. It was just a bunch of high-profile celebrity types, that went to this thing, and it was actually pretty cool. To say the least, But that wasn't like kind of a just a hangout at the malt shop by any means. That was a pretty cool event, But it was nice of him to invite me to that, because I had nothing to do with UHF.
Yeah.
But great movie, though.
Yeah, wow.
You mentioned earlier that you've worked with Carmine a lot over your career, and there's actually kind of a funny story about Carmine and the recording of Eat It.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because I'm working with Carmine on a couple of things right now. As a matter of fact, he's doing some like a box set of the Guitar Zoo stuff that we did back in the '90s, and Vanilla Fudge, and a bunch of stuff he's done over the years, Cactus, and I've worked with Carmine on a lot of that stuff. And I had mentioned to Carmine just a few days or like about a week ago that I was going to be doing this interview with you guys for Weird Al. And he goes, "Oh, really?" Yeah. He says, "Yeah. Tell if you talk to John Bermuda Schwartz, tell him that Carmine says hi." And he goes, "Yeah, I lent John my snare drum for the Eat It track." So,
Wow.
which I thought, what a small world that is. You know?
Yeah.
So, and he would remember that even, And I didn't know Bermuda even knew Carmine, but I guess he does, So that it was kind of interesting. But Carmine's one of these guys that's he knows like everybody, I mean, he was in Ozzy's band. He was in Rod Stewart. He wrote "Do You Think I'm Sexy" for Rod Stewart,
Wow.
and he was, he's like an iconic, musician, drummer. Vanilla Fudge, when Zeppelin opened up for Vanilla Fudge, apparently Bonham has credited Carmine as being a major influence to Bonham's drumming, and I can hear that too because Carmine is one of the first few guys, rock guys, that actually ever did any kind of interesting tom fills. He was in Vanilla Fudge. The guy was sort of a progressive drummer in the days where that wasn't even a thing. So and he's still going strong. The guy's still putting out product. Which I have to hand it to him. That's good for him. Everybody else is passing away, which is not funny, but. It's this last year has been traumatic. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I saw with one of Carmine's albums that you worked on, he brought in a lot of guest artists, including Ted Nugent, and a couple others. Slash.
That's right. Well, that's the Guitar Zeus project. That's we're doing a box set of that from several, like about 3 or 4 albums worth, and we just kind of resurrected a few tracks that never have been released that we've just. That I'm remixing and doing actually adding parts to it. We just had Derek Sherinian from Dream Theater actually play. And the Sons of Apollo. He just played like keyboards on this last track because Derek is well known for his like speed solos and that sort of thing. So it's the only track that Guitar Zeus has where there's a synth lead, but with Derek, his playing sounds kind of like a guitar anyway, so it made sense.
Cool.
And so we're releasing that with some bonus tracks. But yeah, the players that he had on those records, we had Neil Sean, Ted Nugent, Dweezil Zappa, even.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some major names. Brian May played on a track. Richie Sambora. So I mean, every song had a different like guest guitarist on it, and some great playing and really good songs too, actually. It still holds up. Sounds very contemporary still. Steven
Seagal was on it too.
Steven Seagal, yes. Well, Steven's like he's kind of an avid blues fan, So that was his contribution, He even had like what's the guy's name? He's a guitar. He makes guitar. Is it Ernie Ball? I'm thinking. No, it's not Ernie Ball. It's another guitar manufacturing guy that's a real. Was always kind of a wannabe guitar player, and he had him on, for whatever reason. I forgot who it was on. And Zach Wilde from Ozzy's band was on it. Actually, Zach, interestingly enough, like I say, things kind of flow in the same circles. The Richie Blackmore hardly ever does anything for anybody as a guest appearance, but we've done 2 William Shatner records.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Which I was really surprised he would even consider doing it. And one of them happened to be Shatner did this kind of a sort of a tribute to Star Trek in a way, all these songs that were sort of based on space or whatever. So we did Bowie's Space Oddity.
Wow.
And Shatner does his typical, he talks the song, as opposed to singing it,
Right.
So he's doing his shtick. And we're basically, and I got Richie to play the solo on it, but Zach also he was actually I think he was part of the production team in L.A. here, and he played some of the rhythm stuff and whatever, and he played some solo stuff on some other Shatner songs. But the thing that was funny because the iconic part of that song, and I know this is not talking about Al right now, but the iconic part of Space Oddity was that Mellotron string thing that Rick Wakeman played in the original. And the string pad on the new version was kind of like regular synth sound. And I thought, well, I said, you want me to maybe should I just play the Mellotron? They go, no, don't do that. That's Alan Parsons playing keyboards. And I thought, really? Okay, I won't overplay his stuff, you know. Yeah. But just the mere fact that Blackmore would actually agree to do a William Shatner record just blew my mind. That was kind of fun in a way. That was kind of a comedy thing. We just did one that was that's Shatner's new kind of tribute to the blues. We did The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King, and it's the same kind of
cool
his shtick, you know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Blackmore played his guitar on it. And so that's kind of fun, you know. So I'm still not out of the comedy realm, I guess.
Yeah.
still doing some comedy albums. I imagine Dr. Demento could make a field day out of some of the Shatner stuff.
You mentioned you're a fan of Dr. Demento. Did you ever submit any music to Dr. Demento?
Well, no. I mean, I think Al sort of beat me to the punch on that one.
Right.
As far as like the Shatner stuff, you know, I haven't really done that much comedy stuff, but
Okay.
But it was fun hanging out with Barry though, because we got to tour together, and he was an avid collector of exotic beer.
Oh yeah,
Which
really?
I found fascinating. Wow. Oh yeah, that was his thing. You know, everywhere we'd go, Bermuda would collect, albums and vinyl and all that kind of stuff, or paraphernalia, music paraphernalia. And Barry would collect exotic beers, you know, and which was kind of that was sort of closer to my heart actually. But he was an interesting guy, you know. He was entertaining, very kind of mild mannered, you know. Mm-hmm. But he, I guess, really kind of started Al off when you really come right down to it. Because I think it was his radio show where he gave him the most, kind of exploited him.
Definitely.
Yeah. Give him the inspiration.
Yeah. Is he still broadcasting? I guess he is, isn't he? I mean, I imagine he has.
He is still doing weekly shows. He's, putting out some great stuff.
Wow. I got to look him up.
Yeah, he just celebrated 50 years of doing his show.
Oh, my God. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a milestone. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool, yeah.
And to remain relevant. That's, at this day and age. I mean, he's in the right business though. I mean, during the pandemic, I mean, what better way to be working,
right? Yeah.
Broadcasting on the radio, you know.
Absolutely.
And funny music.
You don't have to worry about commuting or anything, or being in person with an interview.
And people always looking for some comedy music release, just to lighten up their day a little bit.
No kidding. Well, it's really it's a shame that how the pandemic has really sort of crippled the music industry. I mean, the music industry has had its ups and downs anyway, but at this point in time, that's exactly what people need, entertainment, but it's not going to happen until they get all the vaccines out there. And it's a lot of friends of mine, they've been looking. That's why we, the Carmine artist on lockdown thing, that's how that started, And so you got to figure out other ways to sort of, get out there. But for touring musicians, it must be hell,
Yeah, it's a shame.
But hopefully, when this is all over, it's going to just open up gangbusters,
Yeah.
Because people be starved for entertainment,
Oh, yeah. Lines are going to be around the block just to get in.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Just for anything.
Because people are like, geez, it's about time. We're able to go out and see a live concert for a change,
It doesn't matter who or what it is, as long as I get out and see it.
Exactly. Yeah, whatever. Just...
Pat, can you think of any Weird Al stories that you haven't told yet that you want to talk about?
I do remember when I did go over to Al's humble little apartment on Highland Avenue, I think it was.
Was that the Galmore building?
It might be. I can't recall the name of the place, but you know where the Dolby Theater is, and where the Chinese, where that whole conglomeration is down there.
Yeah.
It was sort of, it was like on the other side of Highland, a little bit further north, and it was just like kind of an old-fashioned, like apartment hotel facility or whatever, and it was like a one-bedroom apartment, not like the best furnishings or whatever. And he had just bought his Jupiter 8 because he I guess he wanted to be able to do the stuff that I was doing with mine, right? Mm-hmm. So I went over to his place to kind of program it with the sounds I had in mind, And I just now looking back on it, at the time I was thinking, well, this is kind of a humble existence for a recording artist, whatever. And I'm thinking now, well, I bet, and he wasn't really kind of, ashamed of it or anything. It's just sort of where he was living, and now it's like light years beyond that, now he's actually quite successful, but talk about humble beginnings,
Yeah.
But he had enough money to buy a Jupiter 8. And Jupiter 8s weren't cheap back then. They were about like $6,500.
Oh, wow.
So, they were expensive synthesizers in those days. So, and he made the right choice because that was the synth of choice in those days.
So it's all the money he was saving by paying rent on that place. He was investing into his future.
Well, he was probably on some sort of, he's probably, the record label was probably paying him like a little stipend or something, before he was, in the black, so
Right.
he was probably trying to save money. But all it took is that to Eat It to come out, and that was it. That was the big, the launch forward,
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when you found out that Eat It was a hit, this song that you had, worked on?
I think when I first off, hearing it on the radio, it was being played all the time, for one thing. But when I saw the video on MTV, that blew me away, because it was like choreographed like the original, And I thought, that's brilliant. I thought, now this has got to make some waves. And of course it did. And Al, I had no idea he was that talented as, to parody dance moves and the whole bit, he had the whole thing down, so I knew that, okay, this is going somewhere, and of course Eat It was such a gigantic, or Beat It itself, Michael Jackson's Thriller was such a gigantic hit that was a great song to parody, And what was interesting is when Al was telling me about how he gets permission to do all these songs, he has to go to the artist, right?
Yeah.
Because he shares publishing with the original songwriter. And he said, "Oh yeah, Jackson was totally into it, And he's like, "Yeah, that's fine." And Sting and everybody else, Madonna. I mean, they why not? They're gonna get more publishing, so why not?
Right.
Except when he got to Prince, and then Prince basically put the kibosh on doing "When Doves Cry" because apparently, I guess he said it was something that was too personal about his parents or something like that, and he just didn't want to do it. And so that's when Al, when he was doing the Al TV stuff, that's when he did the interview with Prince and just kind of continually ragged on him, sort of like the vendetta against Prince because Prince wouldn't allow him to do his song, But which was very funny. Those
of course.
Interviews were great, classic, But realistically, when you think about it, I would think it would be an honor to have Weird Al do a song of mine. I mean, that would be brilliant. Why not?
Absolutely.
I mean, he's like it's another avenue for publishing money, publishing revenue. But he's kind of, and that's amazing though that he managed to parlay this into I mean, he does get residuals off of all these songs. Obviously, it's not, he doesn't get residuals off of Beat It, of course.
Right.
If you could kind of finagle that would be awesome, But Beat It was pretty big, though,
I guess you could make the case that, some Weird Al fans who are hearing Weird Al songs first are then going to Beat It and these other songs and listening to him because of Al.
Well, that's the thing. He's selling the artist's product. Well, but you got to realize, too, that the original product is promoting his stuff, too, So if Beat It wasn't such a huge hit, Eat It probably wouldn't have been either, But you got a point there, because the fact is that the fans of Al would probably go, even if they didn't know what Beat It was, they'd probably look up Michael Jackson, and they'd buy his product.
Right.
So they both feed off of each other in a way, So yeah, you could probably make a point, but I don't know if it's which came first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
So I kind of don't think that would fly, with most of the estates out there.
Pat, this was a blast going through memory lane and hearing about all these amazing stories.
No kidding, man. I haven't thought about this in a long time, And well, I hope you get to Al before the 36 years from now or whatever you're talking about doing.
We'll see.
Yeah, because Yeah, exactly. No, that would be cool. I'd listen into that for sure, you know.
Thank you so much to Pat. That was amazing getting to hear all the stories from early on in Weird Al's career, and especially those stories from on the road with Weird Al.
I especially loved that story about Al falling through the stage. I hadn't heard that story before, and Dave, you hadn't heard that story before, so we reached out to Bermuda to clear some things up, to see if he remembered what happened.
Bermuda let us know that the event happened on July 7th, 1985 at the Raging Bull in Maryville, Indiana.
And apparently the venue was not ready for a 6-piece rock band. Of course, there's Al, Jim, Steve, Bermuda, Pat, and then, if you remember, William Anderson was also on that tour.
The stage itself was folding risers, and Al fell right through it. Nothing too major. There's only a 2-foot drop maximum.
Oh, man. I would have loved to have been there and see that. We'll have to ask Bermuda all about that next time we chat with him. Bermuda, thank you so much for all of the extra insight.
Always a scary moment when something unexpected like that happens, but I'm glad to see that Al made through it relatively unscathed.
This week's episode is brought to you in part by Discover Darwin, promoting tourism in Darwin, Minnesota. Not only is historic Darwin, Minnesota beautiful, it's also seedy.
Darwin, Minnesota is the home to what surely is the #1 location of producers' hybrids.
Their commitment is simple: to provide the best genetics with the latest biotech traits, backed by outstanding service from a company whose sole business is seed.
What sets Producers Hybrid apart is their access to world-class genetics that are fine-tuned to meet the specific needs of those in the Corn Belt while maintaining a small company feel.
So visit Darwin, Minnesota on your next expedition. Discover Darwin, more than just the twine ball. And after you visit Darwin, be sure to visit discoverdarwin.biz.
Each week, we can bring you this podcast absolutely free thanks to sponsors like Brito, Angel Valenzuela and his son David Cash, Discover Darwin, Jackson Scoggins, and our amazing Patreon supporters like Sparky, Allison, Spencer, Richard, JM, and so many more.
Revenue from our incredible supporters on patreon.com/2000inch allows us to continue doing what we love, which is make fantastically fun, funny, and family-friendly Weird Al podcasts for you each and every week. We'd absolutely appreciate your consideration in joining our pretty stinking majestic Patreon family for as little as $1 per month.
Looking for another way to support the podcast? Head over to shop.2000inch.com for official Dave and Ethan's 2000-inch Weird Al podcast t-shirts, tote bags, mugs, tank tops, face masks, and pillows, and so much more.
Find us online at WeirdAlPodcast.com or 2000inch.com, where you can find information about our guests and listen to past episodes, like episode 20-inch, where we interviewed Ruben Valtierra, Weird Al's longtime keyboardist, who took over the reins after Pat Regan. Please join our Facebook group by heading to group.2000inch.com for episode discussions and other exclusive content. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram via @2000inch and at youtube.2000inch.com. Be sure to share our posts and tell your friends to gill and chill.
We love it when you leave us voicemail on our 27-hour-a-day podcast hotline 347 Spatula. You might even hear your message on the air. You can catch our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or the podcast app of your choice. Whichever you choose, be sure to hit that subscribe button to ensure that you do not miss a single episode. New episodes drop every Wednesday.
It's still the new year! You know what that means. At some point, we will begin airing our series of bonus episodes where we sit down with John Bermuda Schwartz and go page by page, picture by picture, inch by inch through his brand new book, Black and White and Weird All Over. Now, time is running out for you to grab that book if you want to be able to follow along with those episodes. And plus, it's a great gift to give someone for Weasel Stomping Day.
Thank you once again to this week's guest, Pat Regan, and a big thank you to Summer Woods for that amazing Bossa Nova theme. Thank you to the great John Bermuda Schwartz for all of his contributions to the podcast, and thank you, Mike Minnick, for the voicemail and nothing else. A big thank you to all of our listeners, subscribers, Patreon supporters, and sponsors, and everyone who made this podcast and episode possible.
I'm really excited for the next episode. Can we tell them what it's going to be?
Sure, I don't see why not.
All right. Next week, we will air episode 90 Inch.
That was Dave and Ethan's 2000 Inch Weird Al Podcast, episode 89 Inch. The check's in the mail. No, really. Would I lie to you?
Well, not to end on a down subject, but Jesus, this year, my God.